All right, so this Life Update email intro is great because it turns out, long before the Ballad of Varley was ever composed, William wrote me a poem of his own, henceforth to be known as the Barcarolle of Alex. Thus, with his permission, the poem in his letter shall serve as this Life Update's intro. The Barcarolle of Alex. Now it is time for Poems with William, the part of the letter where William writes a poem, ... Wherever he goes, you're sure to know he has tales of old and things to show. An enjoyer of art, anime, and such, it's not an addiction, more of a cultural touch. I do have to give it to him. Violet Evergarden was great, and anyone who disagrees, we can both berate. He speaks quite fast, almost double the speed of your average surfer, high on weed. But what he says, it's quite intriguing. From philosophy to science, he's done his reading. If you want to live life without thinking a lot, I suggest you stay back and speak like a Scot. As for me, I'll jump in and see how long he can talk without needing to pee. You have to understand that he's got quite the brain, something you'll notice hasn't gone down the drain. But most of all, he's awfully nice, just to have around as you navigate life. Because he's very generous, thoughtful, and kind, humorous, upbeat, and never resigned. When I think of him, I remember a quote by one John Wesley, a man of note. My first priority is to be holy, and my second is to be a scholar. That Mr. Treat inspires me to live this way, I would happily bet $1. Isn't that just fantastic? ... Me and William share a brain, I swear. It's great, XD. Anyway, after finishing the last Life Update email, I watched some more of Frien and then slept. The next morning, I had church, and neither Noah nor Joe were there for a lunch bunch, and their absence was felt. Still, good conversations were had, and eventually I got talking about spiral dynamics, which was fun. My audience dwindled as time wore on, but nevertheless, I think people learned some cool things, and I enjoyed recounting the information. Once I got home, Mom, Grace, and I all hopped in the car and drove down to Little Bird, originally to see if they had any quiche left, which they didn't. So then we drove down to Howling Cow, which I had never actually been before, and got drinks there. Now see, that drink ordering experience was an interesting one, because understand, they had a Valentine's menu in place, and it just so happened that the drink I wanted was called, and I quote, a kiss on the lips. Hence, what may have been a daunting task for many presented itself, but I refused to even hesitate. I walked up to the barista, prepared my best smolder tangled style, and said, hey, the scene erupts with sparkles and blossoming roses fill the edges of your view. Can I have a kiss on the lips? It was absolutely fantastic. To be fair, it didn't go quite like that, as before I ordered my drink, I did engage with her in some banter about the menu items, and also, I didn't smolder. Though, now that I think about it, I may have done an eyebrow raise, ... But regardless, I asked for a kiss on the lips with confidence, and she gave it to me, ... In the form of a chai latte, XD. However, the one thing I must say that did catch my attention is our entire banter conversation. And even when I was ordering, she matched my direct eye contact. Like no one ever does that. It turns out XNXJ types particularly do this thing. And I've totally noticed myself doing it. And they call the death stare. Sorry. They do this thing that they call the death stare, where we'll just make such intense and constant eye contact that people find it intimidating. But usually the other person breaks and looks away, but this barista just death stared right back at me. And after a solid minute of conversation, and thereby a solid minute of continuous eye contact, I finally felt the awkwardness most people probably feel in the first 10 seconds, and so I broke first and looked away. I basically never break first, so that was memorable to me. She must have been an INFJ, ... Anyway, having obtained my kiss, I then sat down with Mom and Grace and heard Grace recount the tales and escapades of her New Zealand adventures. It was good. Definitely a wandering and non-linear explosion, but a good one nonetheless. Shortly after that, Shortly after we got back from that, the Myers came over for dinner, which I thought was a welcome Dad and Grace back dinner, but apparently it was advertised as a birthday dinner for me. And we had fantastic food. Very good. From there, we went over to Dunn Elementary and played originally Groundies and then Ultimate Tag. It was all right. Not a bad way to spend the time, but not my favorite by any means. I pushed myself for the first time physically in ages playing Ultimate Tag, and while I hardly did any physical exercise at all, I nevertheless felt super sore the next day. ... But that's to skip ahead. After it got dark and we all came back, we all sat and listened to the parents' conversations for a while. It was mostly pretty boring. Then I thought Johanna wanted to go do the me, her, and Grace talk we had discussed earlier. At that exact moment, which definitely struck me as odd, since it was in the middle of the discussion, and you would think of all people the FE dominant wouldn't want to be socially uncouth, ... But nevertheless, I agreed, only to later figure out that wasn't what she was trying to say at all, XD. So that was a bit of a rip, but such is life. Me, her, and Grace grabbed Boba, and then I was going to take them on a canyon drive, but neither wanted to drive, so instead we just came back to the house and had our conversation in the apartment. That was a very good discussion, if I do say so myself. It ended with Grace calling Taylor and trying to get him to take a personality test, but oh my gosh, that man's attention span is non-existent. I completed the test in 5 minutes, and I swear it took him 30... Absolutely painful that was... But regardless, he did finish it and got an ESTP. Though, upon reflection, I'm mildly confident he's actually an ESFP, just given how he answered some of my questions and my knowledge of him. So yeah, we did get somewhere in the end. It just took ages... The next morning, I woke up and worked for 2 hours on my thisness and thisness and suchness's paper. I then got Wendy's for $2 since they had some sweet deals going on, and I watched anime as I ate that before proceeding to take a nap and then work on my paper for another 4 hours. I stopped once it was time for dinner, and we did Fanime, which Johanna arrived a bit early for Monday night stuff, so she sat in on the tail end of our anime. After some small talk, everyone, meaning Benj and Noah, arrived, and we all piled in the car and drove to IKEA spontaneously. The trip there was great. Some good singing was done. Then once we got to IKEA, we just wandered around some. Me and Benj found some elevated lounging spaces, and then we all bought chocolate and ate cinnamon rolls. From there, we had a complicated journey to Wendy's, but we did in fact make it. And then upon attaining our food, we consumed it as we drove back. Honestly, the drive back was great. I don't know who made it. I don't know what made it so, but the vibe was pretty peak, at least from my perspective. So I greatly enjoyed that part. Then once we got back, people departed. I listened to Jake's narration of the last life update email, which was great, and then I went to sleep. Tuesday was my birthday, but the day proceeded quite averagely. I woke up, did Fanime, had classes, and then talked with Ben about orthodoxy of all things. He initiated that conversation, which I was pleasantly surprised by. I then went over to Neo and Sydney's house, where I heard John's tales of his mission trip to Belize. Then once I got back, Luke and Simona, my cousin Luke and his wife, came over and we had dinner, some good desserts, and just chatted for a while. The conversation was decent, not greatly interesting or greatly boring, but I did discover Simona was an INTJ, and it was very interesting to observe her social style as a female with high TE. I mean, first off, I could totally recognize the TE. Like, it was very distinctive. And second, it made me reflect on how I must appear socially with literally dominant TE. I'll tell you one thing, it certainly isn't warm and fluffy, XD. So yeah, observing her was probably the most interesting part of the occasion for me. But yeah, after that, I cracked some letters as a birthday gift to myself, and also Sydney made me these 2 ENTJ memes, which I actually love. Very well done, Sydney. I will now proceed to share them with you. Aren't those just great? Sorry, I was looking at the memes. They're not that good, not gonna lie. Aren't those just great? Look, if any of you want to make me memes, particularly ENTJ memes, you will at least transiently win my affection. Just figured I would open up the floor, XD. The next morning, I worked on a philosophy paper about thisness and suchness, which I think may turn out to be pretty revolutionary, but we shall see. I then journeyed to the Whiskey Still with Dad, wherein we talked, and he got me a very delicious burger. Man, those burgers are good. That place is pretty posh, but surprisingly not as expensive as you might expect. Here's a picture. Once we got back from that, I was kind of at a loss for what to do, but Esther crossed my mind, so I sent her a text letting her know I was thinking about her, and to my surprise, she was willing and free to call, so spontaneously we talked and called and talked for the next hour or so after what must have been like at least a year. That was honestly really good. Very good call. And I think we're back to how things were and pretty fully reconciled now, so that made me quite happy. However, I did have to cut that conversation short by a bit, as I had already scheduled to meet up with David at Kaba Bar for some chess. Hence, I did that, and first off, I must say that downtown Fort Collins Kaba Bar has a vibe. But included in that vibe is loud and tasteful music, so not all good things, XD. Unfortunately, the main reason I decided to go there, the sit-in-the-floor giant chess set of which Ben spoke, had been removed, so that was a mega sad, ... But still, David and I found a spot and got 2 games in. I beat him for the first game, but mostly because he made a big, dumb mistake, and then he beat me the second game. As for the Kaba itself, it was extremely underwhelming. Per Ben's recommendation, I got the fancy double the price Kaba, but all that ended up meaning was I got half the Kaba for double the price, XD. Yet I tried David's, and honestly, it didn't taste bad, just grapefruity, and so I regret buying the fancy stuff. Also, I felt nothing, like my tongue didn't even go numb, so effectively I paid $11 for meh grape juice. Yay? But hey, you win some, you lose some, ... Still, it was a pretty good game of chess, and I'm glad I checked the place out at least. Once I got home, Mom had made food, so I consumed that. I then worked on this life update email some before having a brief call with Karina and then going to sleep. The next day I woke up, went to class, finished class, and then drove to a coffee shop whose name I can't remember and met up with Luke, Simona, Morgan, Grace, and Ben. But then as soon as I got there, everyone was like, yeah, we're hungry. So I just drove right back home while they all picked up food, because, lol, fasting. After that, I just chilled in a very fluffy chair in the corner of the house and sorted through all the music, buffing up my instrumental playlist with some new content. However, as aforementioned, I was hungry, thus focusing was hard. Hence, after like 2 hours of doing that, I succumbed to throwing the squishy ball around with Luke, Grace, and Mom, and just engaging in small talk for the next 2 hours or so. It was honestly mildly enjoyable. I mean, you all know this about me, but I'm largely discontent with such meaningless activities these days. Interestingly, it's come to my attention that didn't always used to be the case. I'm recording my old life update emails to make an audio backlog, which I'll talk more about later, I presume. But something I noticed is back then, granted back then meaning over 4 years ago, I was much more content spending my life in trivial ways. Like, I would consider just playing video games with the cousins or freeze tag, for instance, a day well spent. Like I would finish the day satisfied even though that was all we did. I mean, to be fair, that might still be how I felt at the end of the day given my mode. I have a vacation mode in which my success condition becomes comfortable existence rather than objective awesomeness. But I don't think I was in vacation mode at that point in time. Though also, to be fair, doing things with people often does leave me more satisfied than not. But regardless, the point is I did a pseudo-pointless thing and I didn't mind so much. And that harkens my memories back to my younger self. That's what I wanted to say. And could I have just said that? Probably, yeah. But when do I ever just say things in life updates in the most efficient way possible? Let's be realistic about our expectations, shall we? Wink. After throwing the ball around, I then drove to Joe's, where per Joe's stay-at-home dog-sitting duties, my philosophy class had been relocated so he could be included. Honestly, it was pretty nice to do it there. Though, had I desired to use the Melangian whiteboard, I would have been lachrymose, as non-existent objects aren't very useful. However, the one downside was that Joe was, distractible. Hence, we only got through one quiz, and the rest turned into a recap generation session to see if they could figure out what was wrong with Anselm and Gödel's ontological arguments. Honestly, they did exceptionally well, I must say. And yeah, that was how I spent the rest of the night before driving home and sleeping. The next day was chemo, in which Neo became my first non-parental recurring chemo buddy. He did well. I got to test him on how to say unicorns don't exist. And also, I shared with him my cutting-edge work on thisness and suchness, which he found very intriguing. I honestly think I'm on the edge of something really big here, and I'm going to have a breakthrough philosophically, but of course, we'll have to see. Still, it's all very exciting. Once we got back and he dropped me off, I just sat in the sun with Mom and Grace for a bit and talked. Honestly, the sun felt mega good on my chemoed body. However, I will say this round we went really pretty light, all things considered. I have no idea what was gone differently, but I only felt bad, not like bad. So that was a big nice. Still, I didn't really have the life force to do anything with my day. Hence, the rest of it was spent watching anime, both by myself and with the family, until I went to bed early. The next morning, I was still fasting, hence, I was hungry, but I was feeling a good amount better. I watched anime to pass the time until I got to eat, at which point I was able to eat a bit before feeling pretty nauseous. Johanna came over because apparently her house was barren, and her and Grace did stuff. I laid outside in the sun and listened to lo-fi while they did their thing, and they got me a chai shake, which was nice. And then she left. I took a nap, had Faname, ate popsicles. See, one really unfortunate thing about the first meal after chemo is most things taste real bad except sugar, which tastes slightly good. Hence, if you're hungry, you just want to eat sugar. So like a good virtuous man, I gave in to my temptations and consumed sugar in voracious quantities, XD. And then that night, I read some letters and went to sleep. Sunday, I was feeling functional for sure, but still meh. But since I was functional, I went to church, wherein I ate some food that tasted gross, due to my nature, not the foods. And then we, meaning Noah, Seth, Joe, me, and Jack, played a game of reverse magic, which was either meh or eh. But it was better than lively social interaction because my stamina was sapped, XD. After that game wrapped up, I then went home, took a chemo nap, and then proceeded to go over to Neo and Sydney's for Bible study, in which I ate their food, sequestered myself away in the office as Bible study happened so I could work on my philosophy paper, and I made good progress. And then I emerged, wherein we all decided to go shopping for food for a movie night. But once we got back, chemo caught up with me, and I had to bail because I felt big tired. However, before I left, Neo and I did finish Children of the Whales. We had actually 10 minutes left from 4 months ago, XD. So, task completed. Once I got home, I watched literally half an episode of Freon and slept. Monday, I had made it most of the way to a full recovery. With just a bit of taste stuff and tiredness, but still basically there, I worked on my philosophy paper for a few hours, and that morning, ate a breakfast prepared by my father as I watched anime, then went down into my dungeon for the aforementioned back recording of life update emails. Did that for an hour or so, then got lunch from Wendy's for $2 because they have the big deals, before getting back to work on my paper and working on that for the next 3 or so hours till I had to leave for Monday night. Monday night was actually really good, I must say. Honestly, a pretty perfect balance of activities. To begin with, completely unrelated to my previous comment, Joe's has been more chipper as of late, so that was nice. Once I got there, he spontaneously offered to give me a haircut and actually did a really good job, so now I look spiffy. But regardless, because Ray and David are away, there was no food. Thus, we all had to make our own, and that was actually pretty fun. It broke up the monotony and added a spice to Monday nights that I enjoyed. Also, my butter spreading skills, unanimously phenomenal. Just ask anyone. Oh, but man, I must say, cinnamon butter on bread is big good, and also big cheap. So in the future, probably going to make that again. So anyway, we ate food. Then we had a mini D&D session in which the party fought one of my aethic demons. Honestly, probably one of my favorite monsters I've made. Here, I'll show you a picture just because they're cool. This is why we use AI-generated images in our campaign, boys, ... Anyway, I think if I had them fight too, it would have been a good challenge level, but still, one was hard enough for them. And yeah, after that, we watched some episodes of Blue Lock and then called it a night. The next day, I had classes, which I did. I worked on this life update email because I figured out if you spread out the life update instead of doing it all in one go, that makes life easier. XD. I then called with Shimmick and was like, hey, I would love to do the interview, but the day you have me in California is the day I have chemo, so I can't, ... However, they said they might fly me out anyway on a different day, so who knows? Maybe I'll get to interview anyway. Pretty crazy that a company is willing to fly out the people they want to interview all the way to California, all expenses paid. At the very least, I think it would be exciting and novel to have the experience, even if I don't get the job, but also kind of hoping I get the job, XD. After that call, I worked on my thisnesses and suchnesses paper, read some more philosophy, You know how I finished my 2 metaphysics anthologies? Well, I've basically started a metaphysics anthology. It's not technically an anthology, but it's structured like an anthology and is about 600 words, so I think it counts, XD. So yeah, once I'm done with this, though, I think I'm for realsy done with metaphysics, ... Probably. Anyway, read some of that, did Fonome, and then I got to talk to Emerson about Jungian psychology stuff, which was interesting. At first, I thought Emerson, who is Grace's friend, by the way, was just super shallow, but I think that much less now. She's probably an INFP, which makes sense with Grace because any buddies, but yeah, I think I was able to say some things she'll find helpful moving forward. Then finally, that night rounded out with a Discord conversation with Sydney that did not go excellently. That's all I have to say about that. The next morning, I woke up early and headed over to the Bowen's house because Alan had invited Neo and I to attend a chemistry lecture where the guy was giving the philosophy of science background behind why chemistry worked. He did pretty well, honestly, like I didn't learn anything, but it's not like the guy said anything wrong, so it was a good, albeit kind of boring lecture. After that, I briefly talked with Neo since the conversation with Sydney was actually brought to his attention. Then, once I got home, I worked on recording some backlog life update emails, did a Walgreens run to have them prepare my steroids, and then did more backlog life update recordings. After that, Michael and I called and we talked as I walked around City Park, and that was good. He's studying formal logic right now, and hence got to explain to me modal logic in more depth, which I found super helpful. And we just chatted philosophy and caught up. Once I got back, I cracked online Sydney's letter, and that was very good. Then before bed, I engaged in a touch of philosophy before letting my body collapse into a paralyzed state. Class was had the next day. I went home early, though, because I figured there was no way my journalism class would have a class activity for the 3rd day in a row, since the class activity days are chosen by the professor randomly. But no, I was wrong, ... There was indeed a class activity, and so I missed it and lost points, rip. I then got Wendy's for big cheap. We're talking a meal for $2.18. Kind of cheap. We're talking $2.18 kind of cheap. Then I did more work on my philosophy paper before going out to provide emotional support for Dad. Now let me just say, providing raw emotional support is one of the most challenging and unnatural things imaginable to me. I mean, I guess that checks. I guess being functionally useless, but every fuzzy is like the definition of FE, my 8th stat, ... But regardless, Dad was fixing Grace's car, and he basically requested I come out there to help him, but we both knew that just meant to be emotional support, ... So though I was begrudging, I did go and proceed to stand beside and encourage him in the cold for about 45 minutes as he very frustratingly attempted to attach a transmission fluid hose. I did basically nothing but just be there the whole time. I mean, on occasion I held a flashlight, but just in general, just being there is so hard for me. But nevertheless, it's for that reason I ended up staying. Because I realized I suck at just being there for people. I want to do something, or at least have there be an objective value I bring greater than, you feel better because you're wasting my time too, XD. But nope, that's not how emotions work, ... So yeah, I did eventually leave before he finished because it was snowing and he got the hose on, so the next part was easy, but the important part was I stayed much longer than a past me would have, so I don't know, maybe personal growth or a personal regression, XD, who's to say, ... Also, while I don't commend Dad's stubbornness and inefficiency, I will say he is hardworking and did get the job done when I definitely would have called it quits for the day. Working in the snow sucks. So that was admirable, at least. Once I got home, I read some of the Spiral Dynamics book, which might I just say, is needlessly esoteric. Like, it's not like wording things in the way they do improves understanding. It just makes them sound smarter, which, when you've extensively read works that actually use big words because it's useful, then you know the difference, and it does not, in fact, make them sound smarter. XD. Okay. After that, I met up with Ben, Joe, Karina, Sam, Seth, Dylan, and this guy named Jordan for pizza, which Jake put together for Benji's birthday. which was kind of a meh experience. I didn't really have much to talk about, and it seemed neither did anyone else. But the pizza was good at least. Then, after some complications, we journeyed to the summit where we all did a round of bowling, and that was pretty fun. We got to go in this VIP section, which, amazingly, given all the time I've spent at the summit, I've never been in before. It was pretty cool. Here's a picture. I totally had the game in the bag until, literally out of nowhere, Jordan, an NPC from my perspective, just came out and got 3 strikes in a row. Like, what the heck? It was so vexing. Here's a picture of the final scores. See that 123 score? Yeah, well, normally I would be proud of that score, but no, there just has to be Jordan's literal 149 right there too. Whatever, ... He won fair and square, but it's still unjust. After that, we all played some pool, which was decent. I got to talk with Dylan some and get to know him a bit better, so that was at least good. From there, since I rode with Jake and Charity, Jake took the nostalgic way back and visited his old abode and work, and we had an interesting conversation about his revised position on what stage he's in, according to Spiral Dynamics. And then, once I got back, I did find a man slept. Alex, side note, in case it's not clear, Jordan's my younger brother. That was the context of who that is. Just FYI, in case that wasn't communicated. The next morning was the funeral of my somehow related... The next morning was the funeral of my somehow related to me, Peter. I never really knew him as he was on my mom's side of the family and we had interacted very infrequently. However, he was Catholic, so the funeral was Catholic, and honestly, I was disgusted with the irreverence with which the homily was given and even the service conducted. Like, the priest did all the right motions and stuff, but there was zero heart in it, and the homily was really bad, like objective garbage. See, I respect Catholicism so much as an intellectual discipline that when I actually encounter it in practice, it's just appalling. Like, it's like I was advertised this beautiful hand-carved wooden statue only to see what they actually shipped me is this injection-molded knockoff. It's actually just gross, and it honestly made me a little mad to see such a beautiful tradition defamed in that manner. But aside from the trash liturgy, the one good thing that came out of it was I got to see David and Sam again, who I hadn't seen in ages. So that was good. We planned to hang out, which I'm excited for. But they were all very insistent I drink alcohol at said hangout, which I am much less excited for. XD. We'll see how I handle that. I left the funeral early because I needed to go buy food for the upcoming cabin trip organized by John, and with the express intent of shooting many guns. So, I went and did that. Yeah, I got way too many eggs, XD. And then, a short while later, after we began our drive, of which here is a picture. However, due to the aforementioned conversation, the start of the journey was pretty tense emotionally. Though I tried to enlighten the mood, and eventually the tension went away, so that was good. While we were going through Denver, we got these empanadas, which were big good, but also big small. There was something big small. Hence, we also stopped by Wendy's to get some extra food. Wink. No, actually, that kind of makes sense. A big small. After that, we arrived at Alan's family mansion. Apparently, the Atkinsons are stacked, or at least used to be. Okay, so let me tell you about this place. So this mansion was built back in the 1980s, and it's posh for sure, but old person grandma posh, XD. It has state-of-the-art, quote, technologies like adjustable lights, a radio built into the wall, a massive cathode ray tube TV, stuff like that. So really cool, but below the functional level of your average house today. However, what's really cool is how it's built. It has 5 half stories. So it's just layers on layers of house. And it's basically a crescent with tons of decks. And on top of that, the rocks are actually built into the house. How cool is that? Here, let me show you a few pictures I got. Because it hasn't been lived in the past 5 years, and it was just old and kind of falling apart in various ways, but still actually such a cool house. While everyone was kind of unwinded, I spent a bit of time stargazing on one of the many decks. It was chilly, but a good experience. Then I had the massive-brained idea to see how my speaker sounded in the pool room, and the answer was it sounded amazing. My speaker is pretty loud in general, but in that room, the bass just reverberated through you. It was spectacular. Hence, of course, I couldn't resist the urge to play some, so the songs I've been loving as of late, and was marvelous. And it was, I don't know what the intended, I'm not sure what that's supposed to say. Pretty soon, Sydney, Neo, and Alan found me, and then we all decided we would do a worship session for the next hour and a half with the awesome acoustics. Here's the doxology we sang at the end, if you're interested. Then, once everyone else headed to bed, I stuck around and played some more of my favorite songs and killed my voice from singing too loud, XD. But it was actually fantastic. Crazy how much joy an echoey room gave me. The next morning, Alan and I tag-teamed breakfast creation to some good music. I played a few last songs in the epic-sounding room, and then we drove up to Alan's family's cabin, which was much less posh and more jank. It was actually really nice weather when we got there, so Neo and I decided to use the nice weather to shovel snow. I shoveled a path to the outhouse, and he shoveled out the fire pit, and then we teamwork shoveled the area around the fire pit. Here's a picture of that. Also, here's a picture of the one-room cabin we all slept in. Once we finished our shoveling work, I took some time to just sip on a peach-flavored sparkling water and sit and think. That was a nice 30 minutes or so. After that, John and his friends Nathan and Alex, Nathan's wife, arrived, so we all sat outside, ate sandwiches, and socialized. Once we finished eating, around 1 is my guess, we then went out to start shooting. Nathan drove his car up, and even though it was four-wheel drive, it did not do well in the snow, so it got kind of stuck, and we just decided to leave it there for the time and fix the issue later, XD. And then began the great shooting. Oh my gosh, so many guns. Basically all Nathan's, XD. All right, are you ready for this? The following pictures are courtesy of Sydney, XD. I shot a 22 pistol, a WMR pistol, a Hellcat, a 12-gauge shotgun. Dude, let's freaking go. A Walter, a Canic, a stubby gun, which I don't know the name of. John. No, this gun is actually called the Judge, and John isn't actually near my line of fire. It just really looks like an XD. I shot a Glock, an AR-10, which was by far my favorite, a Garson Regard, an AR-9, which was just a spray and pray gun, XD, and lastly, a PSA dagger. And with that, we have now covered all the guns which I shot, XD. It was honestly a ton of fun, and time really just flew by. Here's two other pictures Sydney got of us at the range. So yeah, we shot guns until it got dark, and then we headed back to the cabin for food and fire. It was very close, but we did manage to get Nathan's car back down the road, so that was definitely a godsend. Once we got back, Nathan made burgers, and we chilled around the big bonfire which Neo and John made. Here is a picture. And then a very momentous thing happened. I drank alcohol. See, here was my line of thought. On occasions, becoming less infrequent as time progresses and my friends get older, my complete abstinence policy regarding alcohol has inconvenienced me socially. It portrays I'm not fun vibe, which, well, I think that's a stupid judgment to make because someone doesn't drink. It's very much a real and common judgment. So that's the big downside to not drinking. The bigger and more pressing problem, however, is the aforementioned scheduled hangout with the second cousins and Ben, all three of which insist I drink if I'm going to spend time with them. Again, dumb, but nevertheless real. Hence, my thought process was as follows. It seems advantageous to potentially switch over to a moderation, rather than total abstinence, position. In general, because of negative social connotations, but also, given the particular event coming up, it also seems wise to find out how much alcohol I can take and if it affects me strongly in a safe place, aka a place where Neo can monitor me in case I don't myself recognize I'm getting tipsy, XD, before I'm in a state where I might be egged on to drink by people with little regard for my moral scruples. Thus, I didn't just drink that night, I drank until I felt something, which it turned out was after 3 shots of Fireball whiskey, a shot of some different super expensive whiskey, and a shot of 90% proof moonshine. However, that said, that was over like 2 hours, and I ate food during that time, so I'm sure that makes a big difference. But what I learned, it seems it takes a good amount of alcohol to make me feel something, which is useful, and also that I'm much less affected than I anticipated. Well, at least until the point when I could feel a difference. At least until that point, I didn't have almost any significant changes in behavior, and if anything, I felt much more uptight as I was concerned about saying something I might regret because my inhibitions were lowered. So at least to the level of tipsy I got to, the alcohol just made life worse because it felt like what came to my mind was just trying to get slurped out of me by the universe. Like it felt as if I had some sort of obligation to just say whatever came to mind, and so choosing my words felt like a chore in that state. That's the only difference I can speak to psychologically, though I will say my mind did feel a bit more fuzzy. As for other phenomena I experienced, balance was a little harder, not in any sense challenging, but I could feel the difference. And yeah, other than that, I felt super normal. My vision didn't lag at all, which maybe meant I stopped too early to find my limits, and I was able to function, think, and speak normally by all measurable regards. So there you go. That was my first genuine alcohol drinking experience, and I now feel much better about doing a shot with someone for the sake of social cohesion, because I know that's not going to affect me almost at all. Nevertheless, my position on alcohol stands. It just doesn't seem worth it in almost any regard, though I may be willing to drink some if it has social utility. And I don't have to pay because alcohol is expensive. So yeah, we called it a night around 10:30, and we all attempted to go to sleep. Oh, I will say, the alcohol did make it easier to fall asleep. I noticed that too. Bro, true. Same here. I have the same thing. So fell asleep, but then woke up at like 3 or some other ungodly hour and couldn't go back to sleep. So that was lovely. ... Basically, I ended up just lying in bed, unable to sleep for most of the night. And so I used the time to dream about the future, and it was honestly really great. I mean, the not getting sleep part wasn't great, but the dreaming about the future part really got me excited. So that was great. So yeah, I was pretty sleep deprived the next morning, but such is life. And then Sydney and I tag team breakfast creation, of which here is a picture of me making everyone bagel sandwiches. After breakfast, we all engaged in cleaning of various sorts. Some of us cleaned up the cabin while others picked up all the shells from the shooting, which was a lot, mind you, XD. And yeah, it took a bit, but we finally finished everything up around 12 and drove home. Since I was sleep deprived, I didn't talk much on the way back. We just listened to Owl City, and that was nice. Once we got back, we said our goodbyes and parted ways. I took a shower as soon as I got home, which felt amazing. And then I depacked and proceeded to watch much anime, because I was too tired to do thought-productive things. But also, I couldn't go to bed just yet, so I needed some way to kill time in between. I then looked into some AI stuff and what it would take for me to become attractive. And, I think it's pretty feasible if I'm smart about it. Hence, I have now acquired a new goal. Become hot. Upon acquiring that goal, I then went to sleep, XD. Yesterday, I got fantabulous sleep, did Foname, worked on my thisness and suchness's paper, started thinking about the speech I was to give at the Myers birthday thing later that day. I then went over to the Schroyer's house, where me and Grace tried to learn how to shuffle dance. She got it down, I did not. But I suspect that's because the dance was very similar to a dance she already knew, ... Then once I got home, I recorded more of the life update email backlogged regarding which I have a tangent. All right, here's the tangent. So, I've been reading through and recording all my old life updates, right? And it has been striking how much I've both changed and remained constant. Like, yeah, you can totally see continuity of character throughout that time. I was emotionally dumb. I just confidently did what I wanted to do. I was super hardworking and ambitious, etc., etc. But what really hits me is the lack of nuance. I feel like I'm looking at myself, but as a 64-bit character as opposed to a picture. Like, sure, it's definitely still me, but man, like that time I just straight out asked the guy, hey, are you always grumpy? Ooh. Wah! Genuinely thinking that had no offensive connotations and then getting genuinely confused when he got mad at me. Or the fact that I picked Sarah up in my car, drove her to Horsetooth, did a one-on-one hike, and basically tried to evangelize her, and then, like 2 days later, did the exact same hike with the other girl from my work, what's-her-face, not even considering that it might have romantic connotations, or I might look like I'm just trying to play these girls, and then a week later did the same one-on-one hike with a dude that's explicitly gay. Like, it didn't even cross my mind for a second how that might appear, or that series of events might be odd in any way. So why on earth did both those girls say yes and go with me, XD? But it's not just my social intelligence. There's also a general haziness over my thoughts. Like I was just straight dumber then, ... Sure, I was playing the meta, but I hadn't yet discovered the meta. And seeing and remembering how I thought and lived my life those 4 years ago just really brings that difference into perspective. Like back then, sure, I was trying to live maximally well and learn about truth and stuff, but I didn't challenge the frameworks I found myself in, nor did I have nearly the perspective I have now. Remembering back, it was like I was looking at reality through a keyhole. I just didn't understand, well, most anything. But the big import that hit me from rereading those life update emails and recalling my past mindset is basically everyone is still here. While you're in that headspace, the framework is absolute. It's a very spiral dynamics 4 space, where the goods you desire, the methods for achieving them, you just can't see beyond to some other way. A different framework is literally inconceivable. At least it was for me. And I don't know exactly who I'm writing this to, but the few of you that have left that stage 4 mindset understand what I mean. And see, previously I had thought I left stage 4 like as soon as I got back to the States, but that's super not true looking back. Sure, I started touching on stage 5, but reading back, I was still very much having an absolutist mindset as to the frameworks. It wasn't a question of if, it was always a question of how. And I think that's the fundamental divide in my thought between then and now. There's a visceral quality to the difference of the thought that I can try and express, which is what I'm attempting to do, XD. But it's not like the different is propositional, it's perspectival. Because, like, granted, my frameworks for my stage 4 success were not performed gracefully. Like, for me, during that time, succeeding meant pulling an ENFJ socially with an INTP study bent, always being hardworking, gregariously optimistic, athletic, and so on. But that was the challenge. How do I live this ideal instantiation of the good? I didn't have the perspective to break free from viewing the world, though the sum total features of the framework. But see, it's not that those propositions are assessment of the good or right, or for that matter, wrong. It's just that they're shallow. And that's the difference I actually feel. My view of the world is so much broader and so much deeper, and I just assume when I talk to people that they're operating in that same meta headspace. But I've got to get it through my thick skull. They just aren't, and I wasn't. And yes, if my present self were to speak to my 4 years ago self, I would have understood my present self in terms of like raw linguistic meaning, but I wouldn't have got it like I do now. Man, I sound so mystic right now. It hurts my own soul. Bro, you're just NEing right now. I'm going to be 100% honest, bro. You're just NEing right now. NEing is just mysticism. That's really all it is at the end of the day. The point is, there's a point which most of you don't get. I'm mostly writing for myself here, but the expansion of my view is both tangible and shocking to me. And I think I may need to treat people differently now that I can grasp the difference. Also, just remembering/reliving my past self is a trippy experience. I honestly think I was a pretty great human being. Kind of the perfect balance of dumbness and smartness to be lovable. Like, I was just innocently being awesome. Because that was the right thing to do, XD. These days it's more calculated than all that, of course, but don't want to dive too much into framework assertion, lest all you stage 4ers that read this try and murder me. Anyway, thank you for indulging me. It's been quite the revelation personally, albeit an incommensurable one. Anyway, for those of you that would like to listen to the backlog Life Update emails, either because you weren't part of Life Updates until much later and are just curious, or maybe because you want to see how my perspective has changed over the years, or maybe you just want to go back to when you were first mentioned, XD, I don't know. Whatever the reason, I'll have the link to the backlog audio versions in these emails from now on, so you should be able to revisit ones when you want. I will say, after email 14 is when things start to get really good as far as the backlog goes. So if you're just going for entertainment, I recommend you start around there. Wink. I'll be trying to release a backlogged email once a day until I catch up to the present. But we'll see how that goes. Here's a Spotify link. For those of you who don't have Spotify, here's a YouTube link. Now on to the other exciting event that has occurred. after I finished recording a backlogged email, I then mounted the Phoenix and journeyed to the Myers house. Oh boy, wherein I took part in a genuine Myers birthday celebration. See, ages back, like 3 months ago or something, Karina and I were talking, and she was able to obtain for me an invitation to have my birthday celebrated, a faux Myers. And now the day had finally come where that celebration was no longer a dream, but a reality. So yeah, it was pretty great. I shared the occasion with Benj and Karina, and it was pretty cool to be part of the tradition. See, the Myers do this thing where everyone says something they appreciate about you, and it's a super cool tradition. Big approve. But even that was topped because they have a yet greater tradition. Each birthday-ee is to give a speech after the compliments are received. And boy, did I give a speech, XD. Hee hee, I could tell you about it, but it seems best to just show you. Mandatory speech viewing link. Bro, did you remember to put the link in? Okay. Tell me that wasn't fantastic. Hee hee. I'm very satisfied. Well, actually, almost very satisfied. I made 2 significant mistakes in the heat of the moment. The first of which was that I forgot to mention Seth in my Myers speech, which I totally planned on doing. The second, and potentially more egregious, is I made it sound like I told Karina I liked her romantically, and then she turned me down. Yeah, I was very confused about that. That was very confusing. See, I mentioned the fact she was unwilling to swoon for me in my speech, but that was in reference to my request she do the swoon for my Perry the Platypus remake, not some romantic confession. So yeah, Mom was like dying of secondhand embarrassment because she thought I was referencing some non-existent confession I made, and thus I'm assuming many of my hearers, unawares of the context, probably came to the same conclusion. But no, sorry to disappoint you all, but Karina never romantically rejected me. Though she rejected me request to swoon, so like you can extrapolate to counterfactual scenarios if you so desire. I believe in the business, Alex, we call that shipping. Just wanted to clear things up. By the business, I don't mean that I do that. I mean that that's what I've heard it referred to as. Not that I in any way participate in shipping. Just want to clear that up. Too. And yeah, it was great. You know, I think I might really enjoy acting, ... I've never tired it, but I had fun giving that speech. Anyway, other than that, I played a bunch of games of chess while listening to Jake, and I did horribly. I lost to Joe of all people, twice, rip, ... And then we opened presents, which I had no clue was going to happen because I just assumed the Myers didn't do presents due to the exorbitant and mounting costs that would accrue with 11 kids. But that was a very pleasant surprise, and people got me basically all food gift cards too, so that was actually great. Then finally, that night, Benj and I played some table tennis down in the basement and had what's definitely got to be the best conversation we've had thus far. I mean, first off, we got to talk over table tennis, which is always just such a better way to talk. It's why I like walking and talking. It's just so much better to be doing something with your body as you talk, unless you're an SI inferior. That's my added note there. But second, the content of the conversation was very good and also quite enjoyable, so I'm really glad I stayed and did that. We finished talking around like 12:30 or so, if I recall, something around then. And yeah, that brings us to today. Today I have just worked on backlogging life update emails and writing this email, and that's about it. I did go over to the Schroyers and cover for Grace for a bit, though, and just did some of the same over there. And yeah, I did some Foname work on this email, and now we're here. Thanks, everyone, for tuning it, and I shall speak with you all again when the time arises.